That we are doing this, so we are live now. Welcome to Teachers Teaching Teachers. We're waiting for Jay Gillen to join us, and some other people. Cornelius Roberts was with us earlier from the Algebra Project. Al Elliott's joining us. Mark Nason, African American history professor. Is that correct?
Yep.
Fordham, and Jay Jacobs is with us. We're still getting it together here, though. So
Is my microphone working?
patient. It is working now. There you go.
Okay.
Perfect.
Yeah, I use the phone.
So as the folks from Baltimore, the Algebra Project in Baltimore, are joining us, they have part of why we're doing this on Thursday is that Jay can't do it on Wednesday. We normally are meeting every Wednesday, so thank you so much, everybody who's with us here on Thursday evening. But Jay wanted to bring to us, and as soon as he can get in here, he will explain it to us. Some exciting news, some exciting possibilities. Jay, look like you're there. Good.
Yeah, I think I might have managed to get on.
Cool. And I sent emails to the folks you sent me to. I just announced that we were getting going here.
Yeah.
Do you just right at the top of the show, just in case somebody's joining us and saying, "What's that? What are they going to talk about?" Can you just give us the synopsis of, quick synopsis, and then we'll do introductions of, what you have been passionate about very recently about the National Student Bill of Rights and working with teach-ins in opt-outs. You could.
Sure. Yeah. Trey Murphy, who's really coordinating the national effort, should be on soon. I'm sorry we're late. The National Student Bill of Rights is a project, a campaign that young people have been working on in a number of cities since 2007, and it came out of organizing through Free Minds, Free People, the Education for Liberation conference that takes place every 2 years. And so what happened was there was just talk about what would an agenda look like that was a youth agenda that was driven by young people, as opposed to the agenda that sort of is pushed down. All children can learn, therefore we need to hold people accountable, therefore we need to test and punish. So that's an adult agenda, but there's another agenda that the young people have, and they came up through working in these conferences and then going back to their home cities and holding really hundreds of local organizing activities where they talked to young people and said, what should be on the menu of things that we need to campaign for nationally. And so the list goes well beyond what's normally thought of as school reform. It includes things like the right to employment. It includes the right to free public transportation 7 days a week. Oh, there's Trey. Great. Hi, Trey.
And you know what? That's perfect. I just wanted to, because some people will look at this later and say, "What's this going to be about?" I just wanted to get a quick flavor, that's great. We'll go into more detail as we go here.
Sure.
Trey, welcome to Teachers Teaching Teachers. We've been meeting here for the last 6-8 years or something like that, every Wednesday, but tonight's Thursday night, so. Recently, we've been talking about we talked about Coates' article, recent article in Atlantic, and his book a couple of weeks ago, and then the Charleston syllabus last week, and sometimes we talk about those issues. Jay Gillen has been so gracious to come on and talk a couple of times, and so I asked him what's going on recently, and he wanted to introduce you to us and the National Student Bill of Rights, and we've invited a few other people to join the conversation as well. Let's quickly do introductions. I'm Paul Allison. I teach in the Bronx at New Direction Secondary School. Trey, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Trey Murphy. I am the national organizer for the Baltimore Algebra Project. It's pretty much me.
Cool. Mark Nason, welcome.
I'm Mark Nason. I'm a professor of African American Studies and History at Fordham University, founder of the Bronx African American History Project, was once doing community history projects in 30 different Bronx schools until...
I want to know more about that, but go ahead. Yeah.
So basically when Bloomberg and Klein started giving letter grades to schools, all my community history projects were pushed out, and that's when I started becoming involved in education, advocacy, and activism.
Great. And if you want to know more about Mark, guys, just Google him. You'll find some things on Wikipedia. They're quite fascinating, and other places. But great to have you with us and contribute to this conversation here tonight. Free-ranging, pretty informal if you haven't been with us before. Jake Jacobs is an art teacher with me and also involved with Badass Teachers in New York City. Do you want to introduce yourself? Go ahead, Jake.
Yeah, I'm an art teacher in New York City, and I volunteer a lot of different things. One of them is the New York State chapter of the Badass Teachers that has a lot to do with Albany politics, and I get to speak to legislators and reporters, and it's pretty it's pretty interesting because I've spoken to everybody at this point, and when you report on it and you publish it for others, the synergy between teachers and parents groups has really been growing, and so there's a lot of people in a lot of groups here in New York, which is a opt-out epicenter of the nation, I guess you would say. It's
one of them. Yeah.
And so I'm interested in learning ways that the message against test and punish will grow and and go from state to state. So there's that, and then I'm also volunteering with Bernie TV as of about 2 weeks ago, which is a TV project looking to get Bernie Sanders programming 24/7 on YouTube.
Very cool. Thanks. Al, let me come to you, and then we'll come back to the others.
Okay. Al Elliott, 5th grade teacher, near Birmingham, Alabama. I like to consider myself a student activist, whatever that means. I do love the way it sounds. And I'm just happy to be a part of the conversation and just learn as much as I can. I'm interested in making sure that I'm a part of an organization that's educating students and not just testing.
And you've done some work with the Algebra Project as well in the past, right?
Yeah, like years ago, like when I first became a teacher 19 years ago, my first year teaching math, I was trained in the Algebra Project, became an Algebra Project teacher with the Young People's Project. That's when it was kind of based out of Jackson, Mississippi. We did work in Pine Bluff, in Alabama. So, yeah, I have. I mean, since I haven't done any direct work with the Algebra Project in years, but I do remember like the process becoming a teacher. So I'm definitely excited about reconnecting with the Algebra Project.
Yeah, you're doing direct work tonight. That's cool. Yeah, so super to have you. And that voice that tried to drop in there, I think, is Cornelius Roberts. He was in earlier and coming in and out with his device, but we'll see what happens. And maybe some other people from the Algebra Project will be joining us. But Jay is with us. Do you want to introduce yourself a little bit better, Jay Gillen? I've said recently here and there that your book, Teaching for the Insurgency, I found it really inspiring, and I dip in and out of there every once in a while just to get some inspiration. So I feel like you're a friend just through your book, and that's how I first met you, is through your book. So it's super to have you with us tonight. But go ahead, introduce yourself a little more and what we're going to talk about here tonight.
Yeah, well, thanks, Paul. Thank you for the support. And I've been, I think, in 2 conversations, and I've been amazed at the group. And I remember, Al, you talking about your coming in through the Algebra Project when Bob Moses was down working in Jackson, and it's really exciting to be connected. I'm a math teacher in Baltimore City, and I've helped to facilitate the youth-run Algebra Project in Baltimore since about 2001, 2002. But my role now is really completely in the classroom, and just as the young people ask for things, I'll help them. But Trey is really a representative, and I think Jordan, the office manager's in the background. I don't know if he's going to get on as well. But it's an entirely student-run organization, so the oldest employee is 24. And their budget this year is about $700,000, and they, are responsible for it. And so I'm probably not going to have a lot to say tonight. If I feel I can be useful, I'll definitely add things. But Trey, he's the guy who's doing the national coordinating work and has been spearheading the National Student Bill of Rights for several years. So we try to create space for the young people to fashion an insurgency.
Yeah. One question I have, which is why? I mean, this sounds like a wonderful initiative, and for many of us have been trying to promote student activism. Why haven't we heard about this in New York? Why isn't this being circulated throughout all the high schools and middle schools, especially now when students are involved in the Black Lives Matter movement? We also have New York City Let 'Em Play, which is this tremendous campaign to try to assure that every student can play in a sports team if they want to. So, can we get this to New York?
Good evening, everyone. I think the short answer to that question is yes, right? But one of the biggest things around the National Student Bill of Rights is that it requires a lot of work, right? It's not just a political document or a piece of policy. It's really a cultural shifting document, right? And a part of the reasons why it is so difficult to spread it on a macro level is because there are so few people that understand what it is, right? And so I think one of the biggest things for me around the National Student Bill of Rights is that it's a platform for how young people can be able to control and shape their own destinies, right? Their ability to make decisions on behalf of themselves, make constructive decisions, informed decisions, so that they can have the best life possible moving forward, right? And so I think to that extent, there are groups inside of New York who I work with as a national organizer for the Baltimore Algebra Project. You may know a few of them. There's a few groups inside of New York. One of the co-founders of Black Lives Matter actually lives in New York, who's a very good friend of mine. And so we have conversations around the National Student Bill of Rights all the time. But the key thing about the National Student Bill of Rights is that in order for it to be expanded, it has to be expanded not just as an ideal or idea, but it has to be ingrained into the hearts and minds of young people, because it stands for what young people want. It's a cultural shifting document that gives young people the power to be able to speak on behalf of themselves.
So can you say a little more? Is it really intended to be constitutional in some way, to actually be real?
I just want to jump in for 1 second. Hey, Trey.
Yes.
How old are you?
I am 19.
Okay, just want to make sure we're clear on that, right? He finished his first year of college this past year, but he started with the Algebra Project when he was 12.
Yes.
Wow, that's fascinating. That's a great history. And if I could just, I mean, while you did that aside, let me jump in and say I was a little worried that it would be like old white guys talking about this tonight, right? I mean, looking at our screen here. But however, Jay and Mark, if I look at your lives, if I could say this, there's something about the way you guys have made space for other people to move forward that I want to follow and I want to learn from. So there is that just to say, without all the other complications. But Trey, can I asked you, is it real? How is it real? you know, are we looking for amendments to the Constitution eventually? What's going on?
Yeah, so it's a two-part thing, right? One of the biggest things is that a lot of people don't understand that policy follows culture, right? And so policies are made and put in place because the culture says that that's what should be put in place, right? Whatever the dominant culture is, right? And so in order for us to ensure that this thing is effective, one of the biggest things is that we want to make sure that we created something that changed not just policy, but it also changed culture. So yes, having quality education as a constitutional right is something that we're all about. It's something that has to be ingrained into the Constitution, right? But it also has to be something that's ingrained in people's day-to-day culture, because one of the biggest things around the movements of the 1960s was that even though policy said that black people could vote in the South, culture said that they couldn't, right? And so whenever you have policy pinned up against culture, culture wins every time, whatever the dominant culture is. So the question is shaped around how can we change policy and have something that's federally protected by the government while also something that's practiced by day-to-day people. And that's what the National Student Bill of Rights symbolizes. It says that we have federal protection over rights that are already practiced inside of our community.
And if I could turn Mark's question on upside down, could you speak positively about the cities where this is where there are groups where there's some activity around this?
Sure. So one city in particular is Philadelphia, right? We know about the school district in Philadelphia, the crumbling infrastructure there, the budget deficits there that's taking place, the high suspension rates, the school discipline policies, practices aren't been effective. One of the things that a group there called the Youth United for Change, one of the things that they did in Philadelphia as a part of the National Student Bill of Rights Task Force was they pushed for a restorative justice model to be on a district-wide level, right? And so last school year, they piloted out a program. I think it was halfway through the school year. It wasn't a full school year. But halfway through the school year, they began to pilot out a program, restorative justice model there on a district-wide level, right, to reduce the school suspensions that was taking place in the high arrest and incarceration of young people, while also ensuring that young people are held accountable for their actions in a most strategic way that wouldn't have a devastating impact on their future and their ability to grow and succeed, right? Because one of the biggest things is that for us as the National Bill of Rights Task Force, we aren't saying that young people shouldn't be held accountable. Young people should be fully held accountable for their actions. But when accountability trickles down into this rationale that young people should be criminalized, that's where we have to draw the line in the sand. So that's one specific place, right? And we have also made a multitude of gains. One of the things that had recently came out this year was President Obama's initiative on free college, free community college, right? And that comes directly as a result of young people meeting with Secretary of Education Arnie Duncan and the President's personal education advisor Roberto Rodriguez. I think I'm saying his last name wrong, but his first name is definitely Roberto. But it comes directly out of conversations that me and other folks from across the country have had with the Secretary of Education and President Obama's personal educational advisors, pushing them and saying that we got a real problem inside of our communities. Our school districts aren't adequately preparing our young people. And although we are doing it, we're doing it on a very micro level as grassroots organization. And so what we need is X, Y, and Z. And one of the things that we said that we need was access to college and higher education, because in today's society, a high school diploma isn't sufficient enough for you to be able to go and move on, progress into the future, right? And so those are just a couple of tangible wins that we have gotten as a result of the National Bill of Rights. One of the things that we're trying to do is expand it, but it takes time. We have to develop the culture. Young people have to see it as their own. We have to embrace it, and we have to be the ones that are the insurgents pushing for this thing to move forward and doing the implementation of it. Because
is there work in in Boston and in the South as well?
Yeah, so in Boston, one of the things that they just won, a campaign that it was in for years now, was comes directly out the National Student Bill of Rights, which was bus passes for their young people to have adequate transportation to get both to and from school, as well as extracurricular activities before and after school, right? And so that was one specific thing. The National Bill of Rights is a 15-point platform, if I didn't explain it. I'm sorry.
You're getting there. It's fine. Go ahead. Yeah. That was helpful to know, though. Yeah.
It's a 15-point platform, and it's not limited to one specific thing. It's about empowering young people and ensuring that they have the tools and resources that's needed in order for them to be able to control and shape their own futures and progress. Right?
So you've already covered three, right? One is free college education, which is pretty amazing to see on there. The other is restorative justice and not getting kicked out of school, right? I mean, I'm summarizing, obviously. And free transportation to and from school. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay.
Let me raise some. Go ahead.
Are they also doing the teach-ins? This is a question for Trey or Jay. Are these the same young people that are doing the teach-ins instead of the opt-outs?
Correct. That is absolutely correct. These young people are the same ones that are doing the teach-ins, as well as being piloting or facilitating a conversation around what it would look like to have students opt out of the high-stakes testing and in this place do the teach-ins that where young people will be able to control the curriculum that's talked about.
Did that go on this year?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
Did that happen this spring?
This spring, Jay, that's a question.
No, I don't think it was connected with the Student Bill of Rights and opt-out this past spring. I think this is an idea that's kicking around for moving into next spring. And you know, the issue, Mark, about why there are more people knowing about it in New York and other places. Our organizing hasn't been good enough, and we need to do a better job. And so one of the difficulties is that there's a lot of I don't know. There's confusion's not the right word, but when you mention a Student Bill of Rights, there's a lot of people that are, oh yeah, that sounds good. As Trey's saying, that it's an idea that many people might be sort of familiar with, but there's this issue of how to get it to the level of practicing a different culture. And the young people have been really kind of ferocious about this. Is a campaign the young people are pushing, and so the organizing has to be at the level of young people getting together and thinking, how do we want to do this? How do we want to move this forward? And that's very difficult organizing to do. And I think that at the last Free Minds Free People convening, which was just a couple weeks ago in Oakland, the idea came up that there's this very strong opt-out network and all kinds of networks. Badass Teachers is a part of it, that are fighting, pushing back against the testing and other types of reforms. But that's a hook that could be used to help young people organize around the Student Bill of Rights, so that if there's, the picture might be if there are teachers who can introduce the idea of, well, what are you going to do when you're opting out of testing? Like, just going home doesn't demonstrate that you care about your education, but what can you do to show that you care about your education? And by the way, here's this National Student Bill of Rights that young people are pushing around the country. Would you like to get in touch with the people doing that? Would you like to talk to them about some possibilities for what teach-ins would look like, centered on practicing these rights while you're not taking your exams? And,
let me throw something out about like New York, okay? Because the missing voice in these amazing movements in New York were the students. You had powerful teacher activism. You had powerful parent activism. We didn't have the Newark Students Union. We didn't have the Chicago Students. So there's an opportunity here that's tremendous. And as I said, there's this organization, New York City Let 'Em Play, which was a student-led protest of the racially targeted, like, denial of sports opportunities to,
Right.
you know, and the other, but there's another group here that can be,
which is one of the rights also. But go ahead, yeah.
Yeah, there is a tremendous amount of college student activism in New York in the Black Lives Matter movement.
Right.
And there are also groups like the Rebel Diaz Arts Collective or Take Back the Bronx, which have been doing youth organizing. There's a tremendous opportunity to connect to those student groups and the community groups doing youth organizing. And this could take off pretty quickly through those networks. I mean,
right.
I have students at Fordham who would love to work with high school and junior high school students who have been involved in the Black Lives Matter movement. And I also know organizers in Take Back the Bronx. There's a lot of opportunities, in other words.
Yeah, I wanted to just kind of, if I could jump in and ask Trey a question, like more specifically, like when you say there's a lot of work involved, like what does that work look like? Like if, like, because I hear a lot of talk, you know, if there was a better, I guess, organizational piece, and you got a lot more students or a lot more people together, then there is the question of how do you build a new culture. So what does the work look like that you would actually like if
Definitely.
to do?
Am I breaking up? Can everyone
No,
hear?
you're not. Al is, but go ahead, Trey.
Okay, all right. I think I heard your question, Al. So I'm gonna I'm gonna
Good. Go ahead.
So one of the biggest things when we talk about what the work looks like is that we have to ensure that young people have a voice and a decision-making power, right? And so one of the biggest things, one of the starting points is having conversations with young people, right? Young people have to feel a connection, and it can't be you all having conversations with them. It has to be their peers, who they see as their leaders, having conversations, right? The people who they see as most closest to them. And inside of that, an organic, organizing structure will emerge out of that, right? So one of the biggest things, first is having a conversation. After the conversation, young people will have to feel like that they are a part of whatever it is at the discussion, right? So if it's an organizing strategy around young people feeling like they have to have access to higher education, right? Because currently the whatever the case is, high school diploma isn't sufficient, high school curriculum doesn't meet their needs, whatever the case is. Young people have to plan, execute, and move the strategy forward, right? And the role of you all as adults and as people who they see as their elders is to be there as resources, right? Not necessarily to tell them what to do and what not to do, but to give them advice and say, hey, if you do it this way, this is going to be the reaction, or this is going to be the outcome. If you do it that way, this is going to be the outcome. And inside that moment, you're giving them the power to choose. It's still their decision, and they feel empowered, but as a result of that, they want to get more involved, right? Too often in today's society, young people don't feel like their voices are valued because they don't have decision-making power, and adults feel like if they have decision-making power, they're going to make the wrong decisions, right? But specifically for people who pride ourselves on a democracy where everyone is able to make a decision about their lives, as long as it only affects their lives, the young people should have the power to make those decisions. And the role of the adults is to be there if they make a stupid decision or if they make a bad decision, because no decision is really stupid. But if they make a bad decision, to be there for them, even though they made their bad decisions. Not to be like, I told you this was going to happen, but to be like, hey, you messed up. This is how we are going to fix it together. I'm here for you. Just because you didn't listen doesn't mean that I'm going away, right? And young people have to feel that connection. They have to, and then that breeds an entire new culture, right? Where young people are beginning to understand and learn from the mistakes that they make, and at the same time, they're making better choices. They're growing. their progression into the future. And then they're going to want to get more involved because they're going to feel like it's their education. And I'll say this last thing and then I'll shut down. I think one of the most powerful things that I've ever heard is that this idea that no young person anywhere inside the world hates learning. No young person anywhere inside the world hates learning. They hate the act of not understanding what they learn, right? And those are two totally different concepts. And the question is, how can we help young people understand what they learn in the most strategic way where they don't feel like power is being taken out of them or that they are conforming to something that's not their views or their ideals, right? And so we have to be very intentional about that, but that's how we progress forward. That's where we start at. That's where the organizing strategy comes in at, and the organizing strategy is really just to build ownership inside of young people. If young people are fighting for the things that they want to see, they are going to care more about it. They care more about it, they're going to take it more seriously. They take it more seriously, they're going to perform at higher rates, right? And so it's about how do we begin to build this trend, this sense of ownership, and ensure that young people feel like that they have decision-making power and that they have the ability to control and shape their own futures.
Okay. So concretely, let's just sort of talk about this for a minute, and Trey, just jump in wherever. A possible picture is in September, a bunch of teachers in various parts of the country connect with the student activists in their area, high school, and I guess it would have to be high school, but maybe with some college folks supporting. And see if there's not...
By folks, you mean college students?
Yes, yeah, college students.
Okay, go ahead.
See if there are, 4 or 5 or 10 high school students in a particular school who like the idea of this Student Bill of Rights and like the idea of connecting it to not taking tests in the spring. And in each of these, high schools, these small groups of students make a decision, if they're comfortable, to say, well, we're not going to take the tests in the spring. And they say this publicly in September, October. We're not going to take those tests. But we're concerned about our education, so we're going to be in school, and we're going to be practicing the National Student Bill of Rights. And we want to see who's with us. We want to see what students are with us, and we want to see what adults in the school and in the community are with us. And then there's, 6 or 7 months of the hard work that Trey was talking about, of seeing whether young people with older supporters, creating space for them, can come up with some ideas of what practicing the rights would look like in the spring while they're not taking their tests. So one example might be, we're not going to take those tests, but we're going to run sports leagues for each other. We're going to have students who are appointed as referees, as coaches. We're going to have people training, during the year. We're going to have, teams established. And when we're supposed to be testing, we're going to have some really cool sports going on, and that's like, we're going to practice that right to recreation. And sorry, you want us to take tests, but that's not important for our education. Being able to do athletics is important. We're going to do it. And another group might say, studying culturally relevant curriculum that addresses our material needs is important. So we're going to see if there's people in the community that are willing to actually work with us to learn over these next several months and intensively when we're supposed to be taking our tests, to maybe assist in rehabbing some vacant buildings in our area, or to come in and teach us about our history, and we'll decide who it is that we want to teach us about our history and what history we want taught, and we'll have this lead up to figure that out, and then we'll do it instead of testing. Or maybe we want to do poetry slams, and so that's what we're going to do, or maybe make videos, but we'll figure that out over the course of this 5 or 6 or 7 months, and we'll practice these rights instead of testing. So that's, is that a picture that people could work on, or is it just too much too soon?
I have a question.
Gotcha.
So in New York City, this is, the idea of this would be likely to run right into a wall of opposition, and it goes right at the heart of everything. That's probably why it hasn't been tried already, is because they believe that the tests are the be all end all, and people are convinced, except for the growing opt out, but it's not the majority in New York City, and they could, I'm all for this. I believe that my school could use this, and I believe that if you told the students that they didn't have to take the tests, and you even gave them that option, they would jump at it and do anything. So this is a great thing that that if it came from other young people, it wouldn't be seen as a such a drastic takeover. But I'll tell you what, there's a woman named Bianca Tanis, and she runs New York State Allies for Public Education, or NYSAPE, and she was on cable TV in Albany the other day, telling parents to give their kids a refusal letter in their backpacks for the first day of school, and just to let the administration know right from day one that I will not be taking the tests. So this is like something else, that could definitely piggyback on that and be, well, here's the next thing. You would train for this event, or you would do something that's of personal importance or cultural importance, to you and the kids in the school.
Yeah, and so, where would this happen? Would it be an after school?
The picture I was painting was this is during the school day. It's like, the idea would be to take the year. It's an organizing tool. The purpose of the opting out is not just to undo the testing. The purpose of the opting out is to help young people figure out how to organize themselves. Mm-hmm. And so, for us, if it's just an individual kid who opts out and then goes to the library and reads a book, that's nice, but that's not really what we're after. What we're after is where the young people build some sense of power, so that on those testing days, when the administration says it's time for you to go to such and such a room and take your test, there's a sufficient number of young people who are saying, well, actually, we're not going to go and take the test. We're actually going to go and educate ourselves.
We have one huge problem with this in New York, and that's going to be the principals. Right now, in New York State, there's an axe being held over any school that doesn't perform well on tests. They're called renewal schools. They're slated for potential takeovers by nonprofits, by charters. So any principal, especially in a low-income community, who gets a sniff of test resistance is going to see this as, as something which is going to destroy the school. And so your ability to do this on school time is going to be compromised by principals who are in terror of their schools being closed. This is what I experienced, again, had all these amazing community history projects, and once they started grading and closing schools, and under Bloomberg, 168 schools were closed, the principal said, we can't do this. This is why you might have to organize clandestinely outside of school using college students rather than teachers. I think the intimidation factor here is enormous.
Right. No, well, teachers can't do it. I mean, this cannot be teachers saying to kids, don't take the test. It has to be kids saying, we are not going to take the test, and then seeing how adults
But
arrange themselves
how
around
are
the
you
demand.
going to get the kids in a school where there's this level of intimidation to do that?
Well, that's the hard work.
Mark, can I just be a little more subtle about that intimidation, in that I think it's also put out by lots of people from the top down that to suggest this to kids or to allow them to know about this in whatever way is to interfere with their education, interfere with their future, get in the way of their making progress. You know, they're taking hold of their lives. You know, we want kids to be able to take these tests and do well on them and move on. So it's not presented as a it's not. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, I know exactly what you're saying, but I want to go back to something Trey said about culture. The only way to challenge that is for young people to meet with one another to develop their own ideas about what schools should be doing and what their future is, and you're not going to be able to do that in a school building in New York City.
And I'll also
You can have to do it in a community center or some alternative space, in my opinion.
Gotcha.
and I can back that up too. I mean, you know, the principals in my building are like so keyed up, you know, and we just heard in the newspaper that in the New York Post that a principal committed suicide by jumping in front of a subway train because she had been discovered cheating on standardized exams because she was worried that they were going to close her school down. And you know, this is it's devastating because they were already working on 2 teacher suicides of teachers that felt, you know, that they were so oppressed at school. You know, so it is making a splash in the real news. But you know, to me, the only way that this could be brought about is if the actual law changes, and I mean, like perhaps on the federal level. There's an amendment in the ESEA bill that mentions using portfolios instead of standardized tests as an option, and I'm not sure how long that would take to filter down so that people could actually do that by September. But you know, maybe for the future, if they said, look, we're going to base our Bill of Rights on the Bill of Rights. And then say, like, you know, the 10th Amendment says that the federal government doesn't have any power over the schools in the states, and then go from there saying, you know, everything else that you already have in there, you know, these are our cultural norms. This is what we do productively, and you know, these standardized tests. You know, I can certainly attest that in my school, where the pass rate is like 1% or something ridiculous like that, that it's so pointless. You know, we have 40% L's, we have 40% special ed, we have you know, kids that are chronic attendance issues, and you know, with those statistics alone, you know, it doesn't make sense, you know, for those kids to take the test. It's such a waste of pointless waste of time. So,
I want to ask Trey, where do you meet? Because do you meet in schools? Do you meet in community spaces? Because that's the issue. I mean, everything you're talking about has potential here if there's a space. But where is that space?
Yeah, I mean, we can be very real. Mark has students who are ready to come talk to our middle school and young high school students. How does that work? Where does that work?
Yeah, so to your question, Mark, it's a 2-part thing. So one space is definitely the schools. We do meet with students doing at the schools. Most oftentimes it's after school. Sometimes it's during the regular school day, during our classroom time. The second space is that we have community spaces, right? And even to all of you all's point, it is tough changing culture, right? Which is the reason why we're in this thing for the long haul. Culture, we know, is not going to change over time. Policies can be redefined, laws can be added, subtracted, divided, taken away, amended. disamended, whatever you want to say. Laws are easy to change. Culture isn't so easy, right? And so I think the question that we're at, right, is how can we effectively change culture and take a risk in changing culture, while also simultaneously trying to change some of the structural things as well. So yes, we can begin these conversations in community spaces. That's one option. We can have young people have these conversations in the school. We're not saying that we have to have these conversations on a very large scale. One of the most effective organizing tools with young people in particular is that if you have one young person telling another young person, chances are it's going to get around the school in a day or two, right? And so that's a very effective organizing tool. Young people begin to talk about it. You begin to build this idea inside of them. They begin to build it amongst themselves, and then they begin to implement whatever they see, right? Because it's a trickle effect. And young people are always going to pay attention to the people who they respect most, to their peers, to the ones who they feel a very deep connection with. And so that has to be the mechanism. And like Jay said earlier, teachers can't be the ones to do it, right? Because you guys' role there is to support them and be like, hey, this is this, and you got to be honest with them. You have to be honest with them up front. This is going to be the consequences of your actions, and they need to go into that. But you also need to be just as equally honest with them by telling them the consequences of the action, by also saying that, hey, if you do this, something will change. If you have enough people, something will change. Because the whole thing around that also is that while a principal may be able to suspend 10 students, they can't suspend a whole school, right? That's just ridiculous. And so the question is, do we have young people that are willing to risk suspension for this, that can influence the masses amount of people, because young people make up the majority of the school, the masses amount of people, to say that, hey, this is not right, this is not beneficial to me, and this is how we're going to move this forward. But the conversations will start on those little small scales, and then maybe go to a community space, or maybe go on the school-wide.
Is it fair to say that the Algebra Project in Baltimore doesn't come into school to do, I'm asking, civil disobedience training? Although you do civil disobedience training, right? You come in to teach math, right? So I guess I'm asking, is there a way to make the work not appear, it is really academic work too, but be that first? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that it is definitely different mechanism in different ways. The Algebra Project, we come into schools first and foremost to empower young people, right? We come into schools to help young people out where they're struggling. Our motto is not to help young people, but to help young people help themselves, right? And those are two totally different concepts, two totally different models. And so we come in to empower young people, and our footway into the door is by using math, right? Because we believe that math is a life-binding tool. It's a language in and of itself. And for other schools, maybe inside of New York, maybe elsewhere too, one of the things that that I've seen just across the different National Student Bill of Rights groups that have been participating is that they go into schools teaching art, right? Or hosting different community.
In Detroit too, there's a lot of work around like that. But go ahead, yeah. So.
Exactly, hosting different groups. Maybe there's a group at a school that does environmental work. How does that connect to the work that young students are doing around this idea of testing? Instead of them testing, the environmental group can be out planting flowers or cleaning up the community or something like that. What existing programs are already at the school where they know that they could be spending their time elsewhere doing something better for their community and for their students, outside of sitting there taking a test that isn't an accurate measurement of what they know and their ability to understand.
I wanted to mention, when you talked about during the test they could be out, doing other work. It's not just the test time. that's taken away from students. It's also all the prep time and the practice tests and the fake tests, and it's just amazing, the whole structure of testing. So when we're talking about opting out, you know, I mean, maybe students need to think about opting out of, you know, the preparation too.
But then you're talking about creating entirely new schools, which is what Jay was talking about. You know, portfolio schools or consortium schools.
Hey.
You know,
that is the point. It is the point is to really undermine the process of schooling, because the tests are only you know, the surface of that. But what would education look like if it really met the needs of the students? So yes, and I mean, part of what would happen, and the reason I think it would be good, maybe you need to meet off campus in order to do the organizing. You know, I totally understand that might be necessary, but I think it should be done overtly, like publicly. People should talk about, well, we're doing this. We're getting ready to do it. Young people should talk about, we're not going to do the test. They should be open about it, because they'll come up as they're saying stuff like that with, well, if we're not going to do the test, why are we doing the practice test? And if we're not doing the test, why are we studying this curriculum that isn't really what we want to learn, but it's what somebody else is imposing on us? And those conversations generate really tension, and the tension is what creates the space for people to be creative and think of new ways of relating to each other.
You know, I would say maybe an introduction to this in New York City, as tough as we have it, because of our organizational structure and, you know, our administration and everything. I would say maybe if kids could start to see examples of student bills of rights that have been filled out by students, and they can see what the students say and what they asserted, and, you know, and see what other kids in the country have gotten to do instead of the testing. So, you know, I think if I could show that to my kids, it might be inspiring.
I agree.
Can we make that happen, Trey?
Yes, we can definitely make that happen. We collect and compile all of our data, and so we can either send you the electronic data, or we can send you just a couple of paper ballots that we have. So.
Yeah. Now the other thing is, Trey, could you send people to colleges to recruit organizers, or does that go against your philosophy?
No. The National Student Bill of Rights, one of the things that it calls for is that, one, we define young people by ages 25 and below. And so one of the biggest things is that a lot of our more experienced organizers are college students, right? Because a part of it is about creating a pipeline, right? As opposed to having a school to prison pipeline, we want to create a leadership pipeline that extends from elementary to college and beyond, right? And a part of that crucial component is college students, because college students have the most tenure. They're going to have the most years of experience. They're going to be the ones that all of the young people are going to want to be like. You know, they're going to be the ones that they look up to, and that's where a lot of our more older, more experienced guys are going to come from, right? Because soon they'll be our adult allies, right? They will have to understand how they was once a young person, the space that they was given to be able to make decisions on behalf of themselves, how they rose through the leadership pipeline and the leadership change, and then be the ones to pass that knowledge on to the younger folks as they come up and be their resources and their guides. So it's going to be crucial that we have college students, but the crucial part, the absolutely crucial part, is the high school and middle school age students. They're going to make up the masses, the bulk of people. But the college, we have to have college students there so that they can be guides and be able to pass on what they know to the younger people so that they can make the best informed decisions possible.
Trey, can you say a little more about what a teacher does? from your own experience?
Yeah, so an effective teacher, because
Yeah, I mean, to get out of the way, I guess. But yeah.
So one of the biggest things, right? Even so, I'm gonna start with inside the classroom, and then I'll talk about outside the classroom, right?
Okay.
One of the biggest things inside the classroom that a teacher has to do is a teacher has to be willing to share the space of teaching, right? They have to ensure that young people are there effectively understanding what it is that they are sent there to learn. And in order to do that, young people have to feel like they're contributing just as much to the classroom as the teacher is. And so effective teachers have to be there and say, okay, hey, why don't you teach the class today? What do you guys want to learn about? Asking more questions than they're giving answers. Teaching, and in that, if there was one or two students who was inside the classroom who was leaders inside the classroom that could just work with the teacher on the materials for the week and have the students teach their peers, and only thing the teacher is inside the classroom for is for a resource to help them out should they need any help or anything like that, then that would be an effective model, right? It's a model that we still use today. But that's one of the ways. The other way is that teachers can't be in positions where they tell students no, right? Young people hate to hear the word no. One of the biggest things that teachers have to begin to do is they have to begin to be honest with young people and give them all of the information that they need to make an informed decision, right? Because those are two totally different things. They guide them to the right decision, but they don't make the decision for them. And so if I'm a student and I'm like, man, I don't feel like being inside class today, I'm just going to sleep all day. It's the teacher's role and responsibility to be like, you can sleep all day, but this is your education. This is what you're going to miss out on. If you're going to sleep all day, maybe you should consider doing something else. You could be out somewhere else in the community, or what would make you not want to sleep? What makes you so bored inside class that you want to sleep inside class all day, right? And so it's effective teachers ensure that they're creating that space that they don't control themselves, but that students there control, and they are the resources and the guys that is needed to ensure that the space is properly maintained. So that's inside the class.
Trey, I think that's a lot of wisdom there. It is so hard for a brand new young teacher, which we have a lot of, to do. But yeah.
Well, there's one thing that he hit on though. Trey, when you said that the students are teaching the students and the teacher is there as a resource, that really struck a chord with me because we've been taught this. We've been told that we have to do this for multiple years. And Paul can back, well, in middle school, I don't know if Paul has seen it too, but in my last school and even in this school, they're doing that. They have different buzzwords for it, but that was actually something that was observed in my last school. That if a teacher didn't have that going on, then they actually got in trouble for it. So
they didn't have what going on.
If they didn't facilitate student conversations, and that eventually students teach students. The word they had for it was not Socratic seminar, but
yeah.
So that's one area.
Jake, we're short on time, but go ahead.
Yeah. So that's one area that really would mesh with the actual existing policy here.
Mm-hmm. Great. Let's Al's joined us back. Good. Al, do you have any final thoughts here? As we're kind of just going around and saying, we're out of time here.
Well,
what's next?
I just want to just say, I just like the point of the idea behind solving the problem by creating culture or affecting cultural change. Because ultimately, I think that is the solution. I think it's a long-term solution and not a
We lost Al again. Okay, maybe he'll come back. We'll see. Jay, any thoughts here as we close out? Go ahead.
No, I'm just excited about the possibilities, and I hope we can try to generate some of the student-to-student conversations around the organizing as the year goes on.
I think we could do some of this, by the way. So get some of this hangouts with kids to talk to each other too.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, yeah. Jake, gotta unmute, Jake. Good. Good. Okay.
There was a delay. I think that I would like to take steps to get right into this. If we could see some examples, I could I could do versions of this in our school. Our school's a little different from traditional schools. We only have overage, unaccredited, off-track youth, they call it. But there's there's some of the stuff that we've already been kind of experimenting with, asynchronous stuff. So I see a fit, at least in my school, and I'm hopeful that other New York City schools would jump right in on this.
Mm-hmm. Mark? Thank you for joining us, by the way.
If somebody came to my 2 classes, I guarantee you could come out with 5 to 10 student organizers.
Mm-hmm.
Work with the high school and junior high school students. So
when do they meet?
My classes meet Tuesday and Friday. One class is called Rock and Roll to Hip Hop, and the other is a seminar on affirmative action. I have a lot of the student activists in my classes. They could get very excited about this, especially with the models of what's gone on in other cities. I think this is an idea that could take off in New York City properly.
Well, tell me again where you teach. Tell me again where you're teaching, Mark.
I'm at Fordham University in the Bronx.
Okay, great.
And you just contact me, arrange to come to my classes. I have great students who have been involved in all the protests in the city, and they'll jump all over this.
And Mark, I want to learn more about the community work that you've done, because I think there is an academic. Well, I don't know. Who knows? But there might be places we could build. I've been building some curriculum around Renee Watson's young adult novel, This Side of Home. I think that's what it is. At any rate, that looks at gentrification and looks at housing issues. And the Oregon Writing Project has been building some curriculum around that. So I'd love to see some of what you've done in the future. We'll reconnect around that. That'd be great.
I've done a lot of stuff in the history of popular music in the Bronx, which students find incredibly empowering because it's being reinvented all the time with new groups. And this is what I've written about, I've studied, I have oral histories, so yeah.
Great. We should definitely connect more. And Trey, I want to, my last comment here, and then you'll get final word, is, at the Bronx Museum of the Arts right now, and at 2 other museums in the city, there's an exhibition about the Young Lords. And one of the amazing things about the Young Lords is their principles that they put out. And I was looking at those principles alongside of the Bill of Rights and noticing how many similarities there are. So like seeing the history of where all that connections, I think is really possible too. So just to say, Trey, your thoughts here tonight. Thank you for joining us.
First, I want to thank you all for having me on. I think that one of the biggest things moving forward is that we have to begin to have these conversations, right? Only way that culture changes is if we be the ones that begin to change it, and the only way we can change it is by first beginning to have conversations around what it would look like to have an ideal world that we can all thrive in together. Right, and I think that that's so crucial in a day and age where people just don't survive. They don't get along. We don't build sense of community or anything like that. And so the question for me is always, how do we progress forward and persist and move forward? And also, Mark, definitely, we should definitely talk about the college aspect of Florida University. I think that you said it was, but we should definitely talk about what it would look like to have young people come to New York. I'm actually thinking about coming to New York this weekend. There's like a law convening that's happening there, so it should be pretty.
We can get some events if you want to speak somewhere. There's plenty of stuff going on. We have the AQE. We have the bats. We have so many, so many events going on. So if you're in town and you would like to deliver your message, at one of these forums, we can make that happen.
Definitely, definitely.
Okay.
All right. And we will be back here next Wednesday. We're here every Wednesday, usually, at edtechtalk.com/TTT, Teachers Teaching Teachers. We broadcast over the EdTech Talk channel of the World Bridges Network that Dave Cormier and Jeff Lebo set up several years ago at this point. Thank you all for this inspiring conversation. Let's continue. Talk to you again soon.
Thank you, Paul. Do you also make sure I get the emails as well?
Yeah, and you know what? I'll be the connector. Go through Jay and me, and we'll figure it out. Yep.
Perfect.
Yep.
Everyone, have a nice night.
Thanks, everybody.
Great.